Well, first of all, thanks for coming out on a Sunday, sunny day to, because I mean, after all, what is more exciting than a guy talking about adjusted net cash flow and the risks of client concentration, right? About everything else is more exciting than that. So anyway, I don't really have anything formalized prepared, and I thought that we'd have just sort of an informal discussion. And I'm just going to go into my background a little bit and kind of where I've been, how I became a business broker, and a little bit about what I do. Way back when, about 3 years ago when I was 19, okay, all right, never mind. Anyway, it's good that everybody believed that. But basically, I was working for a mortgage brokerage, and my very first deal was this big hard money deal, and it was more commission than I thought that I'd ever see in my life. It was $50,000. I could retire on that, and I'll never have to work a day in my life. Is kind of what I thought because I was stupid. But anyway, my mom had worked for Honeywell and was taking a early retirement, and she called me up one day because she knew that I had gotten this big check, and said, "Hey, let's buy a furnace company." And I said, "What?" I didn't even know what a furnace even looked like. I mean, I knew it was in a box somewhere near the house that would magically heat it or something. But that's about all I knew. And I asked her, "Well, how long do furnaces last?" And she said, "Oh, about 20 years. I go, "Oh, well, that's great. So we're going to be selling something that needs to be replaced every 20 years. Okay. Well, anyway, she talked me into it. We got an SBA loan, bought this dusty old heating company in North Seattle called Greenwood Furnace, and then we changed the name to Greenwood Heating and Air Conditioning because we'd get people calling asking us where they could get air conditioning from. Well, it was us. So changed the name, and we grew it. And during that time, we purchased about 8 or 9 other heating companies and bolted it onto our operation for various reasons. At that time, unemployment was really low, and it was very difficult to get help. And if a technician came through the door and was unemployed, there was probably a reason for that. And so how we were able to get employees was we would target another company that had employees that we liked, and we would buy it. If we had this giant map with pin clusters showing where our customer concentrations were, and if a zip code was kind of scarce in clients, it was costing us more money to dispatch from one zip code through that zip code to the other one where we had clusters. So we would identify a company in that zip code in order to bring the cost of dispatching down and increasing our customer concentration there. Other times we'd buy it for equipment. We also bought a company that was in new construction, and that was a market that we that we had absolutely no idea how to compete in. We had tried. Our employees just wouldn't bring their quality of work down to that level, which, that's not anything bad, okay? But we looked at a company that knew how to do it, had employees that knew how to do it, they knew how to make a profit at it, so we bought that company and ran it as that name. So all of this was happening, and we became bigger and bigger and bigger, and at a point where we had about 90 employees in 4 shops, Lennox Manufacturing came in and offered to buy us. And so we said yes, because their number was really high. And so basically, they came in with an acquisition team, took up our accounting department for a month. All of our employees were asking, why are they here? Well, the thing is that if we let everybody know and the deal fell through, we would be damaged. Not just with our employees, but if our vendors found out, then all of our competitors would know. And then as they're going through the bid process, they'd be saying, oh, Greenwood, isn't that for sale? You know, and all of a sudden we would be really damaged. So it was a nerve-wracking experience to go through that. Really a white-knuckle experience.
Wes, what did you tell your clients? What was the cover?
The employees?
The employees.
We were being audited by the government. Yeah, the government's always the bad guy, right? And so I get to say, oh, those bastards. You know. Oh, wait, can I say that on the... Anyway, so that was really a convenient cover, and people would go, oh, yeah, and then walk off. But when it came time to tell everybody, we said, look, we had to tell you that because we were contractually obligated to maintaining confidentiality, which is true. And so there were some hurt feelings, but all in all, it kind of went over without a hitch. So all of that sort of led me into what I'm doing now, which is business brokerage. And so I help folks sell their company without telling anybody about it. And it's kind of a neat little trick, right? So, you know, imagine opening a bookstore, but you don't want anybody to see any of the books. You don't want to have a sign that says that you're selling books. You know, you don't want to encourage anybody to come in and buy the books, you know, and when they say they want to buy a book, you have to ask them what exact book that they want to buy, and then you'll try to find it for them. You'll be in business for, what, maybe a month, if you're well capitalized. So when a business owner comes to me, they probably have just sweaty palms just even thinking about calling somebody like me. Because honestly, that business becomes your child. When I look back on my experience in heating, yes, there was a lot of times where it was frustrating and painful, but we were responsible for literally hundreds of people's livelihoods, and we built it from the point where we bought it, where we had 2 or 3 employees, to almost 100.
So Wes, when somebody's coming in to buy a business, don't you interview them to make sure they have the capacity
For buying a business?
Yeah.
Absolutely, but I also interview the seller. Okay. In fact, we were just talking about somebody that wanted me to represent their business, but they had horrible financials and didn't have any explanation for them. And so I'm not going to do that because it's going to be probably a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So, and I say it to them in a real nice way, you know. But yeah, you interview buyers. So when somebody comes to me, it's usually because they've seen an ad or something. My friend Adam here has purchased 3 businesses from me, and right out of the Army, right? Your first one within. You were still active, right? So what happened was he would email me. Adam would email me on some of my listings, okay, and ask me questions, and I would email him back, and he was always emailing at these odd times, right? While he was over in Iraq, I didn't know that. So that's the kind of cool thing about technology, is that the world is really smaller. So when he finally came into, go ahead.
Were you running your business from Iraq?
No. I hear when I was shopping, I did. But.
Yeah. He was looking for a business.
Yeah.
So when he came in, I basically asked him, what kind of business are you looking for? What kind of net do you need? What kind of personal expenses do you need to cover? And it sort of gives me an idea of what size of business. Of course, the important question is, how much cash do you have? That's a big one. If you're tolerant to debt, to going to a bank and getting financing, and so all of that kind of comes out in that initial interview. So I've dealt with startups, I've dealt with franchises, independent businesses. I've done a range of businesses from a $15,000 coffee shop to I think my largest deal was a $25 million medical consulting business that was in all 50 states. And that one was a little intimidating because the numbers were so big. And but I was on a conference call with the buying group of it, and it was a private equity group that was looking at buying it. We actually had quite a few people interested in that one, and they'd go through this big vocabulary, blah blah blah, verticals and profit centers and da 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 da, and then they'd say a price, and I realized, oh, they're just talking 5 times net, and it kind of all boils down to the same thing. How much is that business generating for whoever owns it? So, they said, well, that's a simplistic way of saying it. And I said, yeah, well, my client and me are simple people, so it's going to work better to say it that way. And they actually lost out on the bid. The person that bought it was a strategic buyer that made wireless crash carts for hospitals in New England, but didn't have the ins to the hospital systems like this consulting business did. So by buying it, they weren't really interested in what the consulting side did. They were interested in the consultant saying, hey, you got to have wireless crash carts, and we've got a perfect company for you with that. And boom, he had an instant in to all of the hospitals basically in the country. And so that made it worth it. That's what's called a strategic buy, and that's a real windfall for sellers. If they can find the buyer sees an intrinsic value that's more than what the financial value is. So,
is there a profile for the types of businesses you represent? I mean, like typically they don't have succession planning, or they're older.
Oh gosh, I wish there was a profile, then I could better target market. I'm all over the place. I am a Main Street broker and a generalist. So, my practice is pretty general. I favor service companies and manufacturing, but I've done all kinds of different companies. And when people come to me to sell, it's for a variety of reasons. A lot of times they've been at it for so many years and they just want to do something else. They want to retire, they want to go traveling, they just, are tired of selling furnaces for 30 years, right? Other times the seller is desperate. They're in it, it's not making any money. They want their life back and they want to cut their losses. That's a challenging one for me. Just simply because you have to tell the buyer, look, this is really sucking eggs, and are you sure you want to put your money into this, right? And there's buyers out there that have a vision for how they can turn it around. But yet that's a hard proposition. Then I've worked on startups. I've only done successfully 2 startups through banks, and that was I was a big family fun center and a brewery, which was kind of an interesting deal, and tasty, delicious. So, other times a common story I get is I bought this for my wife or my daughter, right? And then the wife and daughter get into it and they hate it. And so they leave, and then you have to hire an employee to take their spot. And so those are common stories. But it's really all over the board. So I think that covers my background a little bit. Is there any burning questions that you guys have about entrepreneurship in general?
I have a question regarding the buyers of companies. Growing it organically is tough, but when you have, as far as the demographics of the buyers, I mean, do you find that veterans are better? running a business versus a non-veteran or people who are just new to the game?
You know, I don't think it really matters. What matters is your internal constitution to deal with it. I think veterans are more equipped to deal with challenges. You know, when things don't go your way, you don't completely fall apart. I mean, you're trained, right, to, you know, for if things don't go your way, right? The average civilian is not. They're not equipped for that, you know, and if I may say, some people on college campuses during this last week are showing that they really are not equipped for things not going their way, right? So I do think veterans have a advantage in that respect, because when you get into business, it's always a bowl of cherries, right? I mean, it is like unicorns, rainbows, right?
Just throwing cash in the air.
So, I mean, what kind of challenges did you come across when you came in?
Reality.
Then you had the stupid broker telling you, "Oh, it's beautiful. it's a match made in heaven." But
I think reality of regular civilian life, where you had to make a buck to have a buck. In the military, it was, you're there, you get paid. Your health care is paid. All your benefits are paid. You need a tooth pulled, it's paid. But switching that as a veteran, that would be my one major advice, was expect what you don't know is coming yet.
right. And
No, go ahead.
so, you know, you've bought 3 businesses and then did a startup.
Yep.
And so one of the businesses he decided wasn't worth having, and you know, because different regulations, insurance costs, you know, outside forces were sort of at pull on it, and then you decided to close it,
Yep.
right? Or decided to outsource or get rid of it.
Yeah,
somehow.
we started to outsource. It was window cleaning. So when we bought it, everything else was functioning, and then so I kind of did it myself to get hands-on, and then put an employee in place, and then a second employee, and it was the cost of insurance that was really starting to kill us. If you're trying to go on a ladder for a certain height, then you require 2 people, and then OSHA had, you know, one person essentially holding a ladder, getting paid the same rate as the guy working, and it was just a lot of hassles. That I just decided that it was putting too much burden on other operations that we were doing, and essentially myself, it was just not worth the hassle of it. So we just phased it out, and it was like pulling teeth for a lot of our customers, because they just did not want to go to another company. And so we held on to it for, I'll say 2 years, until finally we just told everyone stop calling us for it. At the end. We even doubled prices and then made them purchase another service from us to even operate, to do their window cleaning, and people would still pay for it. And it was like I couldn't cut it quick enough. But that was,
So that's managing, right?
So then don't you just turn it back to the broker and say, sell this for me?
I thought about it, but
He was afraid I'd say no.
morally, I don't think I could have done it, because I knew the hassles that were going to take place, and also there was another company that was a franchise that their structure was pretty on the money, but they were starting to take over pretty quick, and it just wasn't for the amount that someone would pay. It just putting that in the hands of someone else is almost like an immediate failure. So it was just easier just to kind of suck it dry for what it was and then close it down.
Wes, can you talk to us about how do you attract investment dollars for a business?
For a startup?
Or if you want to buy one, if you're thinking about buying one.
Oh,
I guess that'd be financing the purchase versus
yeah.
attracting the money.
So when you go to buy an existing business, you know, you've got cash flow within the business, and usually the value is based on like a weighted average of adjusted net cash flow, and that adjusted net isn't what you're reporting to the government. Okay, you're adding back one of the partners or the owner You're adding back depreciation, which is a non-cash expense. You're adding back interest. Some business owners go a little overboard with how much personal stuff they run in their business. So I look at the big stuff that we can absolutely prove and hope for hope for the best with the underwriter, with the bank. There are some things I know that just won't go. So when you're looking at bank financing, you need about 20% typically to make it work. Now that doesn't all have to come from you, the buyer. I'm assuming most of you are buyers. I know there's a business owner here, but it doesn't all have to come from the buyer. It can maybe 10 or 15% from the buyer and maybe 10 or 15% from the seller as a secondary note to participate in the financing. Now banks like that because it gives them a warm and fuzzy that the seller is going, has thousands of reasons to pick up the phone to help you if something happens. Sellers sometimes don't like it because they're typically on a standby note where they can't start getting payments on it for 2 years. They can earn interest, but a lot of them feel like that's a big risk. However, if they're pretty confident in their business and the cash flow, they should be okay with it. And from my standpoint, I prepare my sellers for that eventuality. And then if it's not required by the bank, yay! It's like Mardi Gras, a big celebration. But so that's where an SBA finance comes in, and there's a lot of check boxes that business has to fill. And as a buyer, the biggest thing a bank looks at besides your investment amount and the fact that you might have to have reserves in place to carry you through. Sometimes they'll finance working capital for you as well. But the big thing is experience. How can we translate your experience to fit the business? Okay, so let's say in the military you were in charge of facilities maintenance, okay? And you were trying to buy a janitorial business. That would probably be translatable experience, okay? You know how to dispatch crews, you know what kind of stuff happens in facilities. Property management would be a good one for you. Maybe even some of the trades, like plumbing or heating or electrical. All of that, we could probably make a case. If you're a frontline, infantry guy, trying to buy an accounting firm and you don't have any accounting experience, that's probably not going to fly. Okay?
Or carpet cleaning.
Or carpet cleaning.
That whenever was.
I remember when Adam came in to see me. It was in the depth of the crash, right? It was at the end of 2010, and he said, "Oh no, the military told me, I can get the Patriot loan, and I got that all taken care of. What you're saying doesn't really." I mean, I could tell he was like telling me, look, you don't know what you're talking about. I got this in a bag. I'll have it done in like 5 days. And then that didn't quite work out that way,
No,
did it?
I think we made it about 60 days of arguing with banks and people.
Yeah.
I think we need to have an alternative here.
Yeah, and during that time, it really kind of picked me off because I'd see these commercials from Wells Fargo or whatever. The drab green plane, coming down the runway, and the soldiers starting to get off, and there's the wife and the little kid, and gives his dad a salute, and it's really heartwarming. And Wells Fargo's hey, we're behind our veterans 110%, right? And to somebody like me, I knew that wasn't the case. Wells Fargo was.
They were the quickest bank to say no.
Yeah. In some ways, they did you a favor by doing that.
Right.
But
Instead of dragging it on, it was actually, I guess that's a good way to think of it.
yeah.
They didn't drag it on for a couple of weeks.
Right. And people like me appreciate that too. Then we can change the game. So there's also seller financing, where a seller is willing to take a risk. And a lot of times it's like an equal risk. So, let's say you have 50% down to put on the business and they'll carry 50%. some people are, if they really like the buyer, you really get along well with the seller, they'll take a bigger risk with you, and they'll defer those payments, and they're getting a tax kind of deferment from that, okay? But it is a big risk to them because, you know, if they get the business back, you know, typically it's wrecked, right? So the assets within the business might not even cover the loan. But if, I haven't had too many of those go wrong. I think there was one, but it wasn't anybody's fault really, it was kind of the market. But, so that's a big risk. Another one is accessing your retirement funds. You can access those without penalty to buy a business, and it's kind of a complicated process. You're familiar with it, right? The process for that.
No, I am not.
So you go and you form a C corp within a retirement fund, and you become partners with your C corp, and you get the money out and you use it to buy the business. And the theory is, right, that you pay back to your company and your 401k, and you buy shares back from your company, and eventually your company isn't your partner anymore, okay? The IRS hates this. They hate it with a passion. And you have to do it in a very bureaucratic way. And there's companies that you can pay to guide you through it. One is in Seattle, named Guidant. And you pay them $5,000, and in a lot of times that's just a fraction of what your penalty would be, okay? So it's worth it, but never ever do it yourself. Don't ever even attempt it, because the IRS, if you screw up one step, they will come down on you like nobody's business. So that's another way of financing a business. Those are probably the major ways that I see happening out there.
Wes, how about, what's your take on, do you broker purchases of franchises and sales of?
Yeah.
What's your experience about franchises?
Oh gosh, how long do we have?
Like a Subway or
Yeah.
some.
Okay, so my family has owned a chain of Subways.
Oh.
And gas stations and full service restaurants. So I've been immersed into that world a little bit. I'm going to tell you right now that if you need structure, and you don't want to recreate the wheel, and you need somebody to have policies and procedures, and you put 3 olives on a 6-inch and 3 more if they ask for extra olives, and you charge them this much, and you need all that. A franchise is really a good way to go, because they have it all figured out for you, and all you do is pay them like 12% of your sales in forever, right, for that model. Now, the thing that I have kind of an issue with, because I'm not that kind of person, I like to create things. So it doesn't work well with me personally, but you have to look out for the good franchises and bad franchises. If you're looking at buying a franchise, talk to people that are not on their reference list, okay? That guy on Subway's reference list owns 50 of them, and he's making $1 million, right? Don't talk to him. Talk to somebody that's going to reflect you, right? So if you're going to be an owner-operator of your own Subway, go talk to somebody that has one Subway, right? So you can get a better feeling for how the franchise treats you at that level, and what are some of the challenges that you would have, right? Because the guy at 50 Subways is not going to have the same challenges as you are. He has an infrastructure challenge, okay? You're going to have a profit challenge with one Subway. Also, there's other franchises that sound really appealing, and I'll give you an example. In fact, this family, he was a veteran, and he got injured on duty, and he got some sort of medical settlement for it. It was like $500,000, right? So him and his wife went and researched franchises, and they came up with this one franchise. It was a frozen yogurt franchise. And if they bought this franchise, they'd be the only franchise of this brand on the West Coast. They'd be able to differentiate themselves, right? They have one franchise on the West Coast. And they're big back on the Eastern Seaboard. And so they're going to be pioneers. Okay, now the build out of this was about $340,000 to build out the store with all the equipment that the franchise requires you to get. And why are they requiring that specific equipment? Because the franchise is getting kickbacks, right? There's certain decor, you have to hire certain contractors, and you're not getting the best price. This isn't a bid situation. This is how much this costs. Okay, so they had been in operation for 2 years, and when I went to visit them, they were in the middle of suing the franchise, okay? They were making, now, this may astound you, but it's incredible. They spent $340,000, they built out this space. Their entire family is working 7 days a week in this frozen yogurt shop without break, no vacations. But on the upside, they made $31,000 in a year. Now, isn't that incredible? That was, whew. Some sacrifices are really worth it. But anyway, so they're trying to get their money back. And that's just not going to happen, because that would be, 11, 12 times the net. It wouldn't ever pencil, ever.
But Wes, my gosh, if you're a smart businessman or person, and you look at the costs.
Mm-hmm. But see, franchises tell them what their franchises are doing on the East Coast, right?
Right.
And, this yogurt shop in Florida is making $250,000 a year in Florida, right? Now they're in Washington.
It rains, right? Yeah.
Rains, cold, you have a brief summer where, you're busy, right?
Yeah, but $300,000, you can build your own.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is the franchise marketing sucked them into it, right? They were amazed. They were taken in by the fact that they were going to be the only type of this franchise on the West Coast. Now, let me tell you what the problem was with that. With Subway has food distribution contracts all across the country. Every one of their Subways is within a distribution network, okay? Which makes delivery of product very easy, consistent pricing, things like that. These guys, since it was a new franchise and it was the only one on the West Coast, had zero distribution, right? So their products they had to go to Costco to get their yogurt. And then Costco doesn't always carry the same products, right? So sometimes Costco would be out when they needed chocolate yogurt or whatever, and they were only allowed to sell this particular kind of yogurt. So if Costco doesn't have it, well then you got to get it shipped from somewhere, and it was a nightmare for them. But that was a veteran that used up his entire, pretty much used up his entire settlement.
I looked at 24-hour fitness, and they have a very appealing numbers when you look at their franchises. But growing up on the East Coast, my father is in B&I networking, and someone in network, she bought the facility, or bought the franchise and built it out. Didn't have as much cash, so she had to lease all the equipment. And by the time she hit the end of her first year, she was already trying to figure out how to get out, because she was taking a beating. But if you look at West Coast 24-hour fitnesses, they're doing great. And so Planet Fitness is very similar. Planet Fitness is an East Coast company, and they are killing it. And they're like $9 a month for your memberships. And they say an average of 75% of their memberships sold aren't ever showing up. So that's why
Right.
they get you. They're charging money for which people that never go to the gym, but they just hold these memberships. So when the day they decide they might want to go work out, they do it.
Yeah.
So Planet Fitness is trying to come over here. I think they just kicked one off in Lacey.
Yeah, and I've sold fitness places. That's an important part of their business plan for you not to use their facilities. But
That's their
Oh,
goal.
really?
Yeah, their
Yeah.
goal is their goal is to get as
because
many
if
memberships out.
if everybody used the facility, you'd be packed in there like sardines.
And the cost of towels and cleaning
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
So it's better they're just willing to never see you again. And,
Maybe the only one on coast, if you've got no name recognition or.
well, they talked them into the kind of the pioneering aspect of it. You're going to be leading the way. You're going to be you're going to have the tailwind, right? And you have to really watch out for that. And that's why I say, pick your franchise carefully.
Because this is dating myself, it wasn't like Boston Market, which does well. East
Yeah.
Coast came out here for, about a year?
No, it was longer than that. But you're right. They disappeared pretty quickly. Another example. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer about franchises, but you really have to take the emotion out of it and really analyze it and make sure that it's what you want to do. And the other thing that I found with our subways is you get really good at running your business well, and you become part of the community, and you do things for the community, and you fit in, right? Well, Subway wouldn't allow thank you letters that we'd get from the community for the different charities that we would do. They wouldn't allow us to display them because it wasn't in our franchise agreement. And when you sign a franchise agreement, you're pre-agreeing that whatever dispute you get into, you're wrong. And they're right. Okay? So, yeah, the lawyers. Anyway, so when you start off, you're like, oh, this is great because it's a business in a box. But once you get to running it, you're going to want to change it a little bit for where you're at, right? For your clientele, you might want to carry some different products. No, you can't. So you're locked into this thing forever, and you're not able to create anything. You're just, you just thank God that, they come out with, a sandwich with Swiss cheese. Oh, some variety, and oh, happy day. I can use my brain for about a second now. So it's really tough, and also if you don't own enough of them, you're not treated very well by a lot of the franchises. If anybody ever wonder why Quiznos isn't as popular anymore?
Yeah, what happened to him?
So Quiznos, lots of bankers I knew wouldn't even touch one, right? So Subway may be a pain in the butt. Okay, I'm going to just say it. They're a pain in the butt, and I'm not a big fan. But the couple of things that they do really well with is they have a leasing side that's run by owners. Okay. And they beat the living daylights out of landlords. Okay, they say, hey, we want to put a Subway here, and we're going to pay half of the market rent, and you're going to like it, and we're going to guarantee, not the person running the business, it's not their guarantee, it's Subway's guarantee, that if they fail, we'll put somebody else in here, or we'll just keep paying the rent until we do, right? Well, landlords really like that because it's stability. And they'll put it out for 20 years, 25 years, and you get single-handedly the best rate ever. Oh. Now, what Quiznos did was their leasing division was all under the one umbrella, the one giant corporate umbrella. The umbrella that's selling you the food, the umbrella that's collecting all the royalties, all of that. And what they did was they said, hey, Noel, I know you want to be a Quiznos owner, and I got the perfect spot for you. Tons of car count, foot traffic, you're on a busy street. This place is fantastic. And all you have to do is pay a little over market rate, and it's gold, right? Then they talk to the landlord, and that's this one space that's been so hard to rent because businesses have been come and gone in there, and it's a pain in the landlord's butt. And here comes Quiznos saying, hey, how much will you give us if we can get a sucker, Noel, to get in here into this space that, yeah, there's technically all this car count, but you can't barely see it, you know. And, you know, there's a subway right over here, okay, but, you know, if we get them in for more than market rate, what's that worth to you for 20 years? Oh, yeah, bring it, right? So you get in thinking this is going to be great, then all of a sudden you realize you've been taken, okay? Got this brand new Quiznos, because I don't think the quality of food of Quiznos, I think that was pretty good, probably better than Subway, right?
Yeah.
But it was the way that they treated, that they set up their franchisees to fail. And banks recognized that right off the bat. And so they couldn't finance the resales, and it was just a losing proposition. So that's kind of a danger zone franchise for me. Oh, Quiznos? Yeah, no. But I think there was a big class action lawsuit, and all kinds of things went to heck with that one. But
So is there such a thing as a recession-proof type of business?
Well, bankruptcy does really well in recessions. I actually brokered a bankruptcy firm here on the east side of the state, and he was saying, "Oh, things have gotten so much better in the economy, and it's really hurting. It's hurting me." He was hoping for some giant collapse, but I would say funeral homes have been pretty good through recessions. Their whole model has changed though from the big huge wake and the walnut caskets with cushy pillows and a stereo system playing "You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings" into eternity, right? Which would be my idea of hell. But anyway, to more of a cremation model, and whenever they get the big funerals, that's like gravy for them. But those are pretty recession proof because everybody dies, at certain times. And but let me think. Auto repair is very good in recessions, because people are keeping their old jalopies going rather than buying, occurring a new payment.
As long as we get past the environmental concern.
Right. Well, that's not too bad, actually. Gas stations do pretty well usually.
Storage units.
Storage units are always good. I had this client that he would build apartment buildings in kind of a U shape, right? And then he'd fill them up and sell them. And then when he sold them, he'd build right in the middle this giant storage unit and put a guy in it, and it would just fill up with crap, and people are willing to pay, $150 a month to store garbage, right? And it was just, they're cash cows. Storage units are better when property values are taking it, when you're buying it, because right now their cap rates are really like in the 6 range, which is really expensive, because your purchase money is about that. So you got to have a lot of equity in it to really make it work. But yeah, so I'm a big fan of existing businesses, and only because it comes with clients, it comes with cash flow, it comes with a system that's changeable, okay? You go with the seller system for a while, and you begin making your own changes to suit how you want to run the business. Baby steps. A lot of times it comes with employees, so you're retaining jobs, and that's kind of, how the economic development councils look at my work as job retainage, okay? But I look at it as helping people get into controlling their own destiny and helping the seller realize a value for their work that they've done. Startups are extraordinarily difficult to find money for. Most startups that I've seen that had no financing issues were if you had, like, let's say you had a best friend whose parents were Rockefellers, right? And you said, we need $500,000, and your best friend is a partner with you solely because he's the money connection, right? And so they turn over their couch cushions and get $500,000 out of it, and here's our spare change, and that kind of thing happens, but it's pretty rare. Going to a bank for startup money is really difficult too. The best way to handle a startup, in my opinion, is you do a startup, a proof of concept startup, where you're not going to make a ton of money, okay, but you're going to prove that your concept works, right? You're getting sales, you're getting clients, you're churning a small profit, and you're showing that it's tracking with your business plan, right? That will attract investment money because it's now, it has some provability to it. But if you just walk in there and say, hey, this sounds like a great idea, I need $500,000, usually not going to happen.
Wes, how do you manage your portfolio of buyers and sellers?
I use a CRM, so it helps me track things. So let's say, for instance, I have a client who manufactures carbide tips for sawmills and things, and he also imports stuff. So I'll type into my CRM, wholesaler, manufacturing, and I have buyers who have categorized that that's what they're looking for, and then I'll approach them. But having those guys turn it down, then I'll go to the internet, is where a lot of people are doing their research. So sellers, kind of same thing. I have them in a database. I try to touch base with them, at least once every few weeks. Because if there's nothing going on, I don't want to interrupt their business flow until there is something to talk to them about. And a lot of buyers kind of get out kind of get discarded because if they're not willing to fill out a confidentiality agreement and tell me how much, what their investment capability is or what their vision for that is, then I can't give them any information on anything, right? They have to seem like a fairly good fit for the client. And maybe they're not a good fit for the client that they inquired on, but maybe I have something else for them. So that's kind of how that works. Did that answer your question fully?
Well, I think it scratches the surface
Okay.
of how that works, but you threw out some other things. The confidentiality of, when you're
Right.
Exposing a business and
Yep.
the likes.
Yeah, so confidentiality is the number one concern of a business seller. They do not want the world knowing it's for sale. And some of them that have told me, no, I want the world to know, I tell them that they will regret that. Just if you're that desperate, just have a time frame of just shutting it down. But don't tell the world that you're going to do it, because it's just going to destroy whatever value you have in the business. Really valuable companies do not want information going out, even if the person signs a confidentiality agreement and says what their background is. I like to talk to them and get a better feeling and at least meet them once to really know that person is kind of one of the right fits for this kind of business. So it really depends on the seller, right? So the seller can be, hey, I want you to be, a Guido at the gate, and I don't want anybody knowing. and here's a list of people, if they inquire, you tell them to go pound sand. Okay, I've had that.
The baby boomers are coming to retire, but they don't really have a succession plan. I guess it's a two-part question.
Right. It was all that pot they smoked in the
Yeah, I think so
60s.
too.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
doing it now, too.
Yeah. Exit? Oh man, I forgot to do that in the 80s. Anyway,
But
yeah.
the question is that they don't have any succession plan. Are you finding it difficult for the new entrepreneurs to come on board to buy a non-sexy business because it's not an app or technology?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
No, not at all. I mean, I do have buyers that want things in technology, you know, but that's because they've worked in technology, right? Really, a lot of buyers are cash flow buyers, and then they get their mind wrapped around what the business does, right? So, service industry could mean all kinds of things, right? Retail is all sorts of stuff. Wholesalers, manufacturing, it's, you know, just huge variety out there. Some buyers we actually target businesses for. There's an HVAC company up north that wants an HVAC company in Pierce, and so we're targeting that and trying to approach those clients. But right now there are a lot of buyers and it's a shortage of companies to sell. Yeah.
For a buyer, what do they have to have for you to take them seriously as far as experience, cash? What is it?
Well, right. If they show up with a bottle of Bombay Sapphire, I'm all serious about that, right? Or Maker's Mark, just in case. So, but really, it's about responsiveness, you know. So Adam and I, when we started communicating, he would respond. You know, he sent in the confidentiality agreement. He told me what kind of stuff he wanted, and you know, he responded. And some buyers, you know, I'll answer whatever question, and then they disappear for 2 months, and then they'll come back and want to recenter around a conversation we had 2 months ago, and that to me, it's hard, you know, because I'm dealing with all kinds of other people, right? And they just kind of come back whenever they want. And so I think persistence, honesty about your investment capability, right? And you know, maybe you don't have enough now, but let's talk about what you need, right? And then maybe things can happen that way. So, isn't this exciting?
That's good stuff.
Let's see. What else can I tell you? Why are you here?
I'm just here to learn.
Yeah.
Want to know everything. So.
Okay. All right. Well, you're not going to get that from me. I know you're a banker.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, sir?
Just to learn.
Just to learn? I think I know why you're here, just to learn stuff.
Yeah, well, also because I had a chance to buy a few businesses last year. And someday I want to sell my own property someday. So, yeah, I'm trying to get more information.
Yeah, okay. Sir?
Well, similar, once again, to learn that entrepreneurial spirit, you know, taking that leap of faith and buying into something.
Yeah.
And you had some really good points, a startup versus something that's already existing.
Right. Well, and the thing I like about startups is that you get to make it. You know, it's yours. You know, you get to create it. You get to, you create the logo and everything, right? And from the ground up. That's what I like about it. I don't like the, being abjectly poor for the first couple of years while you're trying to do a proof of concept, right? But if you have enough money behind you, it can really turn into some big things, you know. Sir?
I'm also here to learn.
Just learn?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys want to be in business someday, or?
Hopefully.
Yeah? Okay. All right. When you buy an existing business, it's always, you always have to look at some of the risks too, you know. It could be making a lot of money, but some of the big things you look for is client concentration. Is all that money coming from one customer? And what's their relationship with the seller and how, right? And that should have an effect on value. You look at key employees. Is a key employee going to leave and then suddenly you're toast? Are you going to be able to negotiate an employment contract with that key employee? Things like that. You have to look at.
Do you see are there certain value add activities that you watch your buyers do time and time again that's really successful? Is it systems, is it technology, is it leadership, where they change the business, or do they buy it to keep it as it is?
I have never met one buyer that said, I just want to keep this the way the seller has done it, right?
Okay.
They want to double it or triple it. And that's one thing that a lot of buyers today, going to your question, really bring to the baby boomer businesses is they bring systems. They bring technology, Why are we dispatching from one central location? Why aren't we dispatching from the people's homes, right? Why are we wasting money, doing this when we could be doing that? And you guys, the younger generation has a better handle on how technology can affect things. Where the baby boomer, they understand technology is out there. They just maybe haven't introduced it to their business because they don't know how. So that's what I see a lot of buyers doing. And also they're more energetic about marketing. Where a seller that's been in it for 30, 40 years, if something didn't work, okay, like in 1978, oh, I tried that. 1978, big waste of money. I spent $500 on it and it didn't work, right? Well, today it might work. And so the younger buyers get in there not knowing what works and what doesn't. And yeah, they're going to waste money, but they're finding their way and they're willing to try new things, and sometimes that's a big payoff. So
what's your footprint as a broker? Are you pretty much the Northwest, or will you go nationally?
I primarily work in the state of Washington. So, most of my clients are up and down the I-5 corridor, but I just sold a winery over in Walla Walla, a heating company in Wenatchee, a bankruptcy firm in Spokane. So I have worked outside the state, an LED supplier, LED lighting supplier in Texas, finished, actually a military housing provider, finished work that was in Hawaii, Alaska, and Guam. But they were a Washington company, but they didn't do anything here. So stuff like that. I would say that it kind of depends on licensing requirements of other states, whether I can go there or if I can partner with somebody in that other state. So I can go national if I find a partner that, can better service on the ground there, if there's a reason for me to be there, right? If not, then I would probably just help them find somebody to help them locally. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite sources of data? Like when you're doing market analysis to price appropriately and that kind of thing, do you have some favorites?
Yeah. I have this giant dartboard in my, depending on your political persuasion, vision, a face there. I'm not going to tell you which I have, but really pricing a business is a lot like reading tea leaves in a lot of ways. I mean, banks have a process, but they're wrong. No, I'm kidding. My process is very similar to a bank, and a lot of times a bank will come out with a higher value than I have, though I know that it just won't pencil at that, So the data that I use, I'm hooked in with other business brokers on transaction reporting, so I can find different transactions, some pretty good detail of that transaction. You can drill down pretty far into it. There's also a comparable service that reports SBA transactions for specific SIC code, or what is the other one? NAICS? Yeah. And those are interesting because you see a difference, right? You see these other ones having a lot of seller financing and that sort of thing, whereas the bank transactions, you get a higher value. So in other words, if your company fits in the SBA box, you can probably get a better value for it because more financing is available, and so that opens up the competition, right? Also, I use my own database of sold transactions. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've kept track of all of those. And you kind of have to be careful because, a comparable from 2007 is probably not a good comparable because the world has changed, okay? It's no longer at 4 times net for that coffee stand, okay? It's, like 2, 1.5 to 2. So those are kind of the data points I use. And then also my own gut check with it.
Any more questions? No? It's been an hour?
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for having me.
Before we let you go,